My name is Marcus Blake, and what happened to my foster brother Dylan still haunts me. This was several years ago in Blackwood Reserve, Manitoba, an isolated settlement where the forest seems endless. Dylan was 8. I was 11. My sister Aria was 10, and our foster brother Trevor was also 10. It was a rainy night around 10 p.m. when we decided to play manhunt. Dylan was it, and while he counted, the rest of us scattered into the dark forest that served as our backyard. Aria and I hid near the construction pit, pressing ourselves into the muddy bushes. But Dylan never found us because something else found him first. Dylan's terror. Dylan followed the trail to the pit, then turned left up the neighbor's path. Through the rain, he saw what looked like Aria and me walking together. Smiling, he began following us, but we were already hidden. Then one of the figures twisted its head backward, impossibly far, and stared at him with eyes that reflected light like an animal's. Without breaking stride, both figures turned onto a trail leading deep into the forest. Dylan heard voices calling from the darkness. Our voices. Dylan, come here, we found something, but the voices were wrong. Off pitch, like recordings played at the wrong speed. Dylan dropped into the mud, trembling, as those things that looked like us disappeared into the black woods. Then he ran. The aftermath? When Aria and I returned to the house, Dylan was missing. We found him stumbling from the neighbor's property, covered in mud, his face showing pure terror, the kind that changes a person forever. He told us everything, how the figure's head rotated too far, how its movements were jerky and wrong, like a puppet with tangled strings. How when it heard our voices calling, it smiled with too many teeth. The adults dismissed it as imagination, but I believed him. Dylan swore he heard us calling him from those woods. He described movements that were just slightly wrong, inhuman. When those things heard voices in the darkness, they knew someone was watching. I don't live in Blackwood Reserve anymore, but Dylan and Trevor are still there. Aria and I talk about that night sometimes, and we always end up checking our locks. I think about what would have happened if Dylan had followed those things deeper into the trail. If he'd obeyed voices that sounded almost but not quite like ours. They say skinwalkers can steal your face, your voice, everything that makes you human. I think that's what was hunting in those woods that night, wearing us like masks, calling Dylan into the darkness where no one would ever find him. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if it's still out there, still wearing our faces, waiting for another child to follow it into the trees. I was in college in Portland when my roommate Ethan suggested a weekend camping trip. We arrived at dusk at a campground that wasn't on any official map. The moment we stepped out, the silence was overwhelming. No birds, no insects, nothing. While setting up my tent, I noticed a sign on a rotting oak tree. Private property, nitrogen monoxide trespassing below it. Someone had carved violators will be, but the rest was gouged out. Beneath that, painted in something rust-colored and flaking, was one word: die. Ethan, look at this, I called. When he saw it, all color drained from his face. We need to leave, now. But I laughed it off. We built a fire, told jokes, and went to sleep. God, I was so stupid. The visitor I woke to footsteps, circling our campsite, not stumbling, but deliberate, heavy steps, in a precise pattern, around and around, never stopping. I shook Ethan awake, his eyes going wide with fear. The footsteps stopped. The silence was worse. Then our tent zipper began opening, slowly, one tooth at a time. A head pushed through, but calling. Him, a man feels wrong. His face was covered in filth and dark stains that could have been dried blood. His eyes glowed red in the darkness. When he smiled, his lips revealed black, pointed teeth. The smell was indescribable, rot and copper and something ancient. Haven't you seen the sign? His voice came out wrong, like multiple voices speaking in unison. Slightly out of sync, he reached in, holding a massive bone 2 feet long, sharpened to a wicked point, edges serrated and stained dark. Tools like that aren't for hunting, Ethan screamed. I shoved my hands into that thing's face and bolted from the tent. He swung the bone at me, the air whistling as it passed inches from my skull. I kicked wildly and screamed at Ethan to get to the car. We tore down that dirt road and didn't stop until sunrise. The return, 3 days later, we returned with friends and a baseball bat to retrieve our equipment. What we found made Ethan vomit. Our tent was covered in red paint, or I told myself it was paint. Die was written across every surface in 3-foot letters. Inside were 2 animal carcasses, taken apart and put back together. Wrong. Limbs attached to wrong places. Heads twisted backward. Bones arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. Worse, half buried near our campfire, were more bones. Human-sized bones, with tool marks on them. We ran and reported it to police. But when they investigated, they said they couldn't find the campsite. According to them, there's no campground in that area. The road doesn't exist on any map. I still have nightmares about that smile. Those pointed teeth. I think about the sign, "Violators will be," and realize the message was complete. The die said everything. We were supposed to die. I wonder how many people did die before we got lucky enough to escape. I wonder if that thing with the bone is still out there, still waiting, still adding to his collection.
I was 9 years old when it happened. I'm 13 now, but I still can't sleep in hotels. My therapist thinks I had nightmares, but nightmares don't leave bruises on doors. Summer 2020, during lockdown, my family parents, me, my cousins, my Aunt Rachel, Uncle David, and their kids found a resort in the mountains still open during the pandemic. The photos looked beautiful, but in person it looked abandoned. Gray paint peeling, boarded windows, empty parking lot except for one car covered in years of dust. The receptionist's smile was too wide and never reached her eyes. "You're our only guest this week," she said. Something about how she said privacy made my skin crawl. The first day was normal. We swam, ate dinner, played games. I thought maybe this vacation wouldn't be so bad. The knocking. The second night I woke to pounding on our door, heavy, deliberate, shaking the door in its frame. Dad and Uncle David woke first, then everyone else. Dad checked his phone. 3:33 a.m. exactly. Uncle David crouched and looked through the gap under the door. The hallway light shone through clearly. The knocking continued, but there was nothing under the door. No shadow, no feet, no legs. Whatever was knocking was invisible, or floating, or worse. The knocking stopped, then something tried the doorknob. Once, twice, 3 times, increasingly violent. The lock held. Then came a low rumbling growl that didn't sound like any animal. It sounded angry, hungry. We grabbed weapons, lamps, chair legs, Uncle David's belt. We stood in the dark, waiting. My cousin Emma cried silently. Heavy footsteps shook the floor. Whatever was out there was massive. "Check again," Dad whispered. Uncle David looked through the gap. Nothing, no shadow, just empty, flickering hallway. The truth. After the footsteps faded, Dad investigated. Uncle David watched through the gap as Dad walked the hallway. His face went white. He saw Dad's legs clearly, saw his shadow. Dad came back shaking. "The hallway is empty, but all the other room doors are standing open. Every single one. And the rooms are empty, no furniture, no beds, just bare concrete floors." The knocking returned at 3:33 a.m., but we ignored it, huddled together. Next morning, we packed fast. Mom and Aunt Rachel asked about the other guests. The new receptionist looked confused. "Other guests? You were the only people in the entire resort last night, the only guests in 3 weeks. The season's been slow since the incident on the 3rd floor. Some people think it's haunted now." We didn't ask what happened. We left. The discovery later, I looked up the resort online. Reviews told stories I wish I didn't know. Knocking at 3:33 a.m., doors opening by themselves, security footage showing static on the 2nd floor. One review from 8 months before our visit, a family whose child never came back after investigating a knocking sound. Police searched but found nothing. The child was never found. I think about what was knocking on our door, trying our lock, walking with footsteps too heavy to be human. I think about those empty rooms. Uncle David saw Dad's shadow, which means whatever was there the night before was real. It just didn't want to be seen. Or maybe it couldn't be seen. Something between visible and invisible. Something that knocks on doors at 3:33 a.m. Something that collects children brave enough or foolish enough to answer. We were lucky. We kept our door locked. We survived. But I wonder, what if we had opened the door? What was it trying to collect, knocking until someone finally answered? And is it still there? Still knocking? Still waiting for the next family to check in?